Now, when it comes to trade deadlines, the Warriors are not really known for making any major moves in the middle of the season, but this felt like the one year where that could potentially change with the new GM in Mike Dunleavy and with the move that he made within a few days of being in his new position of trading Jordan Poole for Chris Paul. It very much seemed like this would be a situation where things would be different, especially after seeing how much this Warriors team has underperformed throughout the first 50 games of the season. Well, here we are, 2 hours after the deadline as I'm recording this, with essentially the same team that they went into it with. Now, this is pretty interesting, mainly because for the last 1 or 2 months, there have been talks here and there about potentially being more active as the trade deadline came around. With Steph saying, basically, if things stay the same, then that's the definition of insanity, right? He said that not even a month ago, and with Shams actually having a report coming out around that same time, stating that pretty much everybody on the Warriors would be available at the deadline other than Stephen Curry. But, as I said before, a whole lot of nothing, which, to be fair, after Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby had already been traded earlier in the season, there wasn't really a whole lot that they could do, especially if they wanted to make a move to get them back into contention. But there are a lot of moves that they could have made to at least give them a better shot of making the playoffs, at least, because that's not even a guarantee at this point. They are the 11th seed, sitting on a record of 22-25 as I'm recording this. That could change by the time you're seeing this, as this is probably going to go up right before the Pacers game. But 22-25, the 11th seed in the West, not really being competitive with a lot of the best teams in the league. So it's not even really like last season where you're competitive with all those good teams. It's just that you can't win games down the stretch. They have been just flat out bad this season. And so when you think about the assets that they actually had to trade, particularly Andrew Wiggins, who to his credit has been playing better recently and I guess kind of saved himself from being on the trading block, so good for him. But it does seem like he has been picking it back up. But it is also worth noting that he's had a similar stretch like this earlier in the season and then went right back to whatever the hell he was doing before. You have Klay Thompson, which, to be honest, I don't think that he was even on the table to begin with, given how ingrained in this team that he actually is. Obviously, while he has been playing not great basketball for most of the season, he did have a great stretch towards the start of the calendar year of 2024. And while he is making $43 million, it's not necessarily an untradeable contract because of the fact that it's an expiring contract. But I think that they are going to be taking their chances with him in free agency this offseason because he's not going to be making $43 million next season or for the rest of his life, unfortunately. But it is possible that they do re-sign him for a more team-friendly deal in a few months. And so I can understand why they didn't want to part ways with him, also just being the Warrior legend that he is. People like Moses Moody and Corey Joseph have also been in a lot of talks recently. I don't think I would have minded parting ways with Moses Moody, given that, I mean, he's not even going to play anyway, or at least not play as much as he realistically should be. So what's the point of even keeping him around? He is a very good player, but I thought that he would just need to be somewhere else with a team that's actually going to play him. Jonathan Kuminga has quickly become the Warriors' second best player, and it's not even really close. So a lot of people came into this deadline expecting him not to be traded, or if he was traded, it would have been for a major needle-moving trade, but obviously there weren't that many of those on the table, so he will remain a Golden State Warrior, much to the delight of the entire fan base, I'd imagine. There was a deal that he was sort of involved in, but not really. The Bulls wanted Jonathan Kuminga in return for Alex Caruso, which is obviously insane. The Bulls are also delusional, but that is another topic for another day. And so, the only move that the Warriors made during the 2024 trade deadline would be trading Corey Joseph to the Pacers for a second round pick and cash, which is fine, and that's the bare minimum move that a lot of people were expecting them to do because they wanted to free up a roster spot to sign someone else to a guaranteed deal, probably Lester Quinones, who's been playing really great recently, or possibly signing someone from the buyout market, or although I'm not even really sure if the Warriors can actually do that because they're already in second apron, and so I'm not even sure how much more salary they can actually take. This might be mainly a move to free up a roster spot to sign Lester Quinones to a guaranteed contract, which is eerily similar to the trade deadline that they had in 2021. Obviously, a lot of Warriors fans will remember that season, the season, of course, in which Steph went nuclear by himself, and the only move that they made was trading Brad Wanamaker to the Charlotte Hornets in return for cash, and they used that roster spot to sign Juan Toscano Anderson to a guaranteed contract. And so it just looks like a repeat of that. Whether the next season after that will be a repeat of 2022 is yet to be seen, but I wouldn't count on it. And the issue mainly starts with what led this team here in the first place, which was the Chris Paul trade, because it was clear from the middle of last season that the Warriors were gonna struggle against teams with size, and pretty much everybody knew this. Their tallest player was Kevon Looney, and they were pretty much just content with having people like Kevon Looney and JaMychal Green running the five. And so they run into the Lakers, given the huge free throw disparity that didn't really even matter because Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. So you lose to the Lakers, who have an insane amount of size, and then you come into the offseason with the mindset of trading Jordan Poole, which I understand because he was never going to blossom on this team anyway, given how many guards there already were ahead of him. Or they weren't going to bench Klay Thompson for Jordan Poole, especially after the season that he had, which is arguably the best season of his career. And so all is well, right? You got rid of the problem theoretically, or at least that's how a lot of them were talking. And you come into the season talking crazy amounts of trash, saying things like last year was the exception, this year is the rule, and now you are below 500 with 30 games left. And you still think that this team, as constructed, can still make a late season run. I am confused. I am not one to be overly critical of the front office and decisions being made, because I obviously don't know as much basketball and I don't know what's going on up there. But as a fan, what the hell? This very much feels like a repeat of last season, where that's also kind of the vibe that you got from them during the regular season, but then after they were eliminated, you had Steve Kerr talking about this team basically overachieved. And so I feel like we're heading down a similar path to that, which, going back to what Steph said, insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Obviously, I'm still well aware that there wasn't a whole lot that they could do given their salary situation and just the players that were actually available. But keep in mind with that is the fact that teams were getting a lot of quality players for way less than a lot of people thought that they were worth. PJ Washington got traded to the Dallas Mavericks in return for Seth Curry and Grant Williams, who has been playing awful since his Linsanity run towards the start of the season. And then Dallas also got Daniel Gafford from Washington in return for Rashawn Holmes. That is a lopsided trade. The Knicks trading for Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks in return for Quentin Grimes, a decent player, Malachi Flynn, Evan Fournier hasn't been playing, Ryan Arcidiacono, didn't even know he was still in the league. If that's what teams are getting for players like Bojan Bogdanovic, you could have definitely had a better deadline than this. Now, as I said, they did try to get an Alex Caruso deal done, but Chicago was just high. But you could have definitely tried to get off of some more contracts to free up cap space. Chris Paul is not your future. I had some high hopes for him coming into the season. Great player, great point guard, but in terms of upside versus downside, Chris Paul's main upside is that he doesn't turn the ball over. His downside is that he slows pace, which goes directly against what this team is built for and has been doing for the last however many seasons, and obviously a liability on defense at this point in his career. He is not the defender that he was 5 seasons ago, and that's just how life is. He's 39 years old, and so it would have been pretty nice to see them get off of his contract, even though it isn't expiring, as just like Klay Thompson's. It's still crippling your whole salary, and unlike Klay Thompson, I can't see Chris Paul being a valuable asset in the future. Klay obviously has slowed down, but I see him being more valuable to this team in the future than someone like Chris Paul. But to quote one of my favorite artists as of right now, let's just say it is what it is and was what it was, because nothing about this is changing anytime soon. at least not until the offseason. And the Warriors seem very content with the roster that they have, even though they are below 500. And while they have been missing some key pieces like Chris Paul, like GP2, like Moses Moody, who just came back from injury, those, with all due respect, are not the difference between you being below 500 and being a title contender. GP2 has been a great point of attack defender, and he's been pretty much the main point of attack defender this entire season outside of Andrew Wiggins, but he is injury prone at this point in his career, which is something that you have to keep in mind. Moses Moody has been great in nearly every single game that he has gotten minutes, but he just hasn't gotten minutes. Hopefully now with Corey Joseph being off of the team, that will change. And you have Trace Jackson Davis, who has been solid defensively and solid on the boards. Hasn't been playing, even though Steve Kerr said that he was going to experiment with more Draymond Green and Trace Jackson Davis lineups. I don't know what's going on. This is all very confusing. I am just, at this point, I'm just along for the ride. This video that I made at the start of the season, 2 games into the year before the Warriors went 5-1 in their next 6 games, is now looking to be possibly my worst age take in the history of me doing this. So that's very cool. But that's about all I have to say about Golden State right now. This team is unserious, and I am just sitting back watching the circus unfold. This is a stress-free season for me. I did make a video last week talking about Jonathan Kuminga and the recent stretch that he's been having, so if you want to, you can go check that out right here. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.